All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I am the executive director of Karis Circle. Karis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Karis Books, and Karis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're really excited to be here tonight in celebration of Snapping Beans, Voices of a Black Queer Lesbian South. We've been so excited about this book ever since we first heard about it. We've been waiting months to get to celebrate it. We first heard about it last year and got to talk to Dr. Jayme Canty about it, and then we were like, all right, we're gonna get it on the calendar. So it's really exciting that this day has come and that we have such a beautiful panel here in celebration of it. Snapping Beans offers a collective narrative of Southern queer lesbian women and gender nonconforming persons. Throughout the text, the American South acts as both a region and a main character, one that can shame and condemn, but also serve as a site of reconciliation. So, I want to tell you a little bit about our panelists and then about Dr. Jayme Canty. So, I'm first going to introduce Dr. Stephanie Y. Evans. Um, Dr. Evans is a professor of Black Women's Studies, WGSS, and AAS at Georgia State University. She served as department chair for 12 consecutive years at Georgia State University, Clark Atlanta University, the University of Florida, and also maintained her passion for research. You also probably marinated it in the area of Black women's historical wellness. Her areas of focus are Black women's intellectual history, memoirs, and mental health. She is the author and editor of 9 books, including Black Feminist Writing, A Practical Guide to Publishing Academic Books, which came out last year, and which you can watch the YouTube video of on Karis's YouTube feed, as well as Black Women's Yoga History, Memoirs of Inner Peace, which is also on our YouTube channel. She also wrote Black Women in the Ivory Tower, 1850 to 1954, an intellectual history. She is the lead co-editor of 5 books, including Dear Department Chair, Letters from Black Women to the Next Generation of Leaders, Black Women and Public Health, Strategies to Name, Locate, and Change Systems of Power, and Black Women's Mental Health, Balancing Strength and Vulnerability. So we are truly in the presence of a great author, and we're very glad. That's you. Um, Dr. Lanice Littleton is originally from Denver, Colorado, and has been living in Atlanta for 15 years. She holds a PhD in humanities with concentrations in African American studies and history, and a master's degree in African American studies from Clark Atlanta University, as well as a bachelor's degree in ethnic studies from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Following her doctoral studies, she was a postdoctoral research fellow in public humanities and African American life at Clemson University, where she worked on the Call My Name Project, an African American burial ground at Woodland Cemetery Project. Dr. Littleton has taught multiple courses in humanities, history, and African American studies at institutions such as Clark Atlanta University, Morehouse College, and Agnes Scott College. She is a member of the National Council for Black Studies and the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. As a public historian specializing in community engagement, Dr. Littleton works to provide community members access to gathering and preserving history in a myriad of ways, which include museum tours, developing exhibitions, conducting and supporting oral history projects, participating in community-based preservation projects, and conducting community presentations and workshops. Welcome, Dr. Littleton. Forrest Evans is a licensed Atlanta based lesbian librarian. As an HBCU grad and continuing her mother's Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Inc. legacy, she is committed to community. She now works in sports and tech for Warner Brothers Discovery. Evans is also the logistics coordinator of Gay Magazine, the largest editorial and news source for Black queer voices. She has primarily worked in academia and special libraries, from Columbus State University, the Tubman African American Museum, Satilla Regional Library System, South Georgia State College, Fort Valley State University, the University of Alabama, and Atlanta Fulton Public Library System. Favorite Librarian is her blooming platform that focuses so that solely circulates Black and queer literature and resources. From continuous collaborations with HarperCollins, Echo Books, Source Books, and more, she enjoys contributing to academic circles and public spaces for Black and queer healing, growth, expression, rest, joy, and learning. Monica C. Evans is a fourth-year humanities PhD student at Clark Atlanta University. Clark Atlanta is well represented tonight. Monica's research includes literary and political analysis of science fiction and fantasy novels, film and television, and social media and popular culture. She's written using various Pan-African theories, including womanism, Afrofuturism, negritude, adaptation, digital and literary culture, liberation, revolution, and consciousness. Monica is a current fellow in the CAU Center for Africana Digital Humanities program, where she assists with developing faculty and graduate student workshops, curricula development, and additional programming. Monica holds a Master's of Public Administration from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a Master of Divinity from Emory University. Before re-entering academia, Monica held a long career in city and county government, nonprofit leadership, and community development. So welcome, Monica. And the person of the hour is Dr. Jayme Canty. Yes. Dr. Canty is a humanities scholar and oral history scholar who amplifies marginalized voices in her research, teaching, and activist service. She's an intersectional humanities scholar activist with a focus on the experiences of Black women and Black queer persons living in or from the American South. Her work intends to humanize the experiences of marginalized Southern Black persons. Her research focuses on the collective narrative of how the American South shapes and molds the experiences of Southern Black, queer, lesbian women and persons. She has presented at several conferences about her research, such as Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies South, National Council of Black Studies, and National Women's Studies Association. In 2022, she was appointed as the board member of WGS South, working as the Black Indigenous Persons of Color Caucus Chair. Her current research chronicles the collective narrative of Southern Black, queer, lesbian women and gender-nonconforming persons, uncovering how the American South, particularly the Christian Black Church, shapes and molds their lived experiences. No longer her forthcoming manuscript, now out in the world. You can hold it in your hands tonight. Snapping Beans, Voices of a Black, Queer, Lesbian South, outlines the ways the South informs their intersectional identities. She is currently a professor at her alma mater, Clark Atlanta University. So welcome to you all, and welcome to everybody who's watching here with us in the room in Decatur tonight, and to everybody who's watching online. We're really glad to have so many people with us already in the chat. We will have an opportunity to ask questions. If you're here in the room, I'll bring a microphone to you. And if you are online, I will bring your voice into the room. And I want to just say also that Marianne Adams, who is the founder of Zami Nobla, is here with us online. And she said, "It is Zami Nobla's honor to co-sponsor this event. What a sweet blessing to witness these brilliant sisters." So thank you to Zami Nobla for always being down to co-sponsor things with Karis and for all the work that they do in our communities. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jayme Canty, and we're going to hear from this amazing panel.
Can y'all hear me? Oh, God, yeah. Good evening, everybody. Thank y'all for coming in this, of course, Southern vernacular of y'all. Thank y'all for coming. And I will say you will hear some Southern vernacular throughout my conversation this evening with our conversation this evening. But I just want to thank Cherry's Bookstore. This has been literally a dream come true. When I was actually writing the book, I really wanted it to be showcased here. So it's definitely a dream come true just to be here and to hold space during Women's History Month. So thank you so much for having me. I actually told them, I said, y'all really don't need to have me during Women's History Month. I understand. I'm not that deep. They said, oh, absolutely not. You can come during. So thank y'all so much for having me and hosting this event. It's definitely a coming to full circle. So thank you so much. And thank you for this panel, this amazing panel of Black women, scholar, activists, community people, who are doing the work in the South, around the South. And so everybody on this panel has inspired me in some way or another. My favorite librarian, I was another person, a dream come true, to work with you because I followed her on Instagram and I fangirled a little bit when I found out that she was going to be on another presentation I did, actually my very first book talk at Gwinnett Libraries. Fangirled a little bit. I said, wait, the favorite librarian? is talking to me. So we are low key in the face of a celebrity right now. So I'm definitely thankful that you were graciously accepted. Um, Dr. Littleton, we go back so much. And she was actually one of the first persons I gave a book to because I trusted her to look at it, critique it, give me what I needed. So she read it and said, I have questions. And that's why I said yes. I needed her to. She's like, I have questions. And I said, yes, this is what I love. So I definitely love and respect the work you do. So I'm honored to have you on this panel. Dr. Evans, I sat in her office. I just said this before everyone came in. I sat in her office in a existential crisis and was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. She's like, okay, well, you're writing a book. I said, no, I'm not. She's like, yeah, you're writing a book. So anyway, what's your book going to be about? If you could write something about the South, what would it be? And snapping beans came to life in her office. So in the midst of tears. um, and so she loves and she pushes. And this is why this book is possible because we sat in your office. So love you. Thank you so much. Monica's future doctor, Monica Evans. She took a few classes with me. And I had a class last semester at Clark Atlanta University entitled Southern Queer Theories. I think that's the name of that sounds about right. And in that course, her discussion and what she got from the book was so insightful and literally took my work to the next level and asked, okay, so what's the next thing? And I said, what do you mean, what's the next thing? So literally excited to have up and coming scholar look at my work and see it as valuable. So this means very much to me to have you here. So without further ado, I am going to very quickly, because I want us to get into conversation. Actually, we not. I might read it at the end. I'll see if there's time left. Because I really want to make sure I don't take time away from y'all in this conversation. So I'm going to ask two questions. Hold on. I don't know why it keeps going back 13 minutes. Okay. So the first question I have for y'all is to identify specific narratives, chapters, themes, or discussions in the text that help you to better understand the experiences of Southern Black persons or Southern Black queer lesbians. And I'm just going to give people about 3-4 minutes each. We can go in order or we can popcorn it, however y'all would like to do it. If you don't mind, do you want to? Okay.
So I'll start by saying when I was reading this book in class, what stood out to me was the ways that I, as a Southern queer woman, found myself in and out of the text. And I found myself consistently thinking of like, how do I fit into the story that's being told here? And how are my experiences of being Southern and being Black and being queer different or the same or a variation on the themes that I read in the book. Um, but I will start by kind of giving an overview of what I read and took from the text. So throughout the book, Dr. Canty is providing narratives from Black, queer, lesbian Southern women who share their different points of oppression. They share the ways that they've been locked out of their families, the ways they've been marginalized in their communities, the ways that they've been sidelined in their churches or outcast from their religious spaces. They share stories that describe how they've had to hide themselves in their workplaces. They express the internal self hatred and trauma that comes along with the internal battle around coming to terms with one's identity and the struggle to become comfortable with an identity that everyone and so everything and so many people around you are telling you is wrong. They also share about the reconciliation that comes when you, as a queer Black woman in the South, are able to see yourself as fully human in spite of those negative voices that would tell you that you're not human. And through that, one is able to self articulate and self evaluate the ways that one is human, and one is able to claim freedom for oneself. In doing so, one is able to be in community with other Black, lesbian, queer women to collectively see and claim humanity for each other. And that Black, queer, lesbian South space of collective healing and humanity is a site of resistance. It is liberatory because it allows one to embrace one's own humanity. And when you are able to see yourself as fully human and claim freedom internally, you're able to talk to other people and work for yourself and your community and your collective freedom. And this book is showing a method by which Black queer lesbians in the South are able to claim that humanity and claim humanity for each other from a place of strength and vulnerability. And they're able to build a bridge of resistance from which we can all be free. And the the Black queer lesbian South is an affirming, authentic place of freedom where Black queer women decide to unapologetically exist out loud. It is an intersectional place where all of one's identities are healed, reconnected, and become whole. And it is a method by which Black queer lesbians claim Southern citizenship and declare that they belong here. And our joy in that collective being is resistant it helps us to resist oppression and trauma, and through that it becomes a seat of pan-African nationalism. That's the end.
Oh, okay, I got you.
Okay, thank you. That was fabulous. I love you, Canty Can. This book is delicious. That is the first thing that came to mind when thinking about what's the takeaway message. That it's a whole meal. It's not a snack. It is a lot to work through. You feel like you are dining in the South and you are nourished accordingly. Um, it also has a clear data set because this is a book that I can assign. I'm teaching feminist methodologies, and as I tell my students, if you don't have data, you don't have research. So you get that right at, like, we are introduced to the real characters, the main characters, the voices right up front. This is who I'm working with. These are my interlocutors. This is not, I am doing research on a community, that you are part of a community and that is represented by you placing up front the voices that you're working with. So we don't have to guess or look back in the footnotes on page 328 to see who these people are in your community. Um, you show there's diversity in community. On page 29 and 143, you talk about the interlocutor's experience, and we see that identity and self-definition looks different in this community of Black queer women in the South, right? And we know that there's diversity in community, that I'm Blackity Black and I'm Black and I love Black women, that's great, but we're not all the same. And within this community, you're showing that there are different experiences, there are different ways to identify, right? And that those ways are not static, they move over time and they develop over time. And so we get to see queer femme, queer masculine, queer non-binary, right? And in the voices of the people who are being able to speak for themselves. You have no interest in speaking for a voiceless community, which I can't stand when people say that, right? The South is, but you also show the South is not a monolith, that there are regional differences, even within the state, between urban and rural and country, and the language. And this is what I mean when I say the book is delicious. The language, and it's easier to identify when people are speaking in their language when you're saying, something in another language, right? Like if you're Afro-Latina, or if you're, like you insert those things, you insert the Southern language into this text, that we get a feeling of that being a part of you, but that it's not, there's Southern country is different from, right? There are nuances in that, and that's brought out in this piece. The way that you work through the theory of snapping beings, that you came into, and that's it. You came to, you are very clear about, I know it does go fast. You're very clear about your evolution as a researcher. And so I'll finish by saying that there's nuances that you show in the queer community in differences between gay men and lesbians in the church, right? And you reclaim the sacred, because usually when we're talking about Black queer women, we're talking in terms of blues, right? And that's the secular. You're bringing the Black queer right back into, and you're reclaiming that sacred spirituality. And I have a lot more that I'll say on my second question.
Hello. Oh. Hey, friends. Listen, y'all. Happy Women's History Month. Happy Black Women's History Month. I think that's why I'm here. I have a couple of things to say in a very short time. So I'm going to tackle the first and say that you all are witnessing Black history not right now because I am here because of nepotism. I am here. You hear me among these giant scholars, but I'm really here because I've known Jayme Canty longer than anyone in this room. Jayme and I have been friends since the day we met at orientation, her second year of the master's program at Clark, and my first year, literally 15 years ago. We've been through everything together, personally, professionally, and scholarly. So we know that the personal is political, right? I can say that in this room and everybody can nod their head and say that. And so I have a personal relationship and love for Jayme Canty as my sister and my friend. I want to emphasize that she's actually Jayme Canty Williams because we got married. And I used to be Jayme and Ebony's roommate until they got married and started acting funny towards me. I had to move out. But I'm so proud of you, friend. And I know that Dr. Josephine Bradley is so proud of you. We took Black feminist methodology with Dr. Bradley like 15 years ago. And so to see you at this point from there, I'm so proud and so grateful. About 15 years ago after class, Jayme said to me, you know, I'm really surprised that as a Black feminist, you don't believe. And I was like, wait, who's a Black feminist? She was like, you, girl. And I said, I don't know. And she's like, everything that comes out of your mouth is Black feminist. So yes, you are. So Jayme has taught me so much about myself and my own identity. And I am not a Black queer lesbian from the South. I am a cisgendered heterosexual woman from the West. I'm from Denver, Colorado. I do not have Southern sensibilities. And that's why I love this book, because Jayme brings the South to life as a character, the characteristics that I experienced when I first moved here, but I didn't understand. And so her ability to do that so accessibly and relatably is why she gave me an early copy of the book. She emphasized that in certain circles, I could be highly critical of the text. And so I knew when she gave it to me, it was with the full intent of me giving her honest feedback. And after I got myself together and stopped crying because I was so proud of my friend, I said, friend, this is brilliant. So for me as a historian, my lens, when I read the text, all I hear is Sojourner Truth, 1851, ain't I a woman? Aren't I a woman? Ain't I a woman? Aren't I a woman? Because I feel like that's what every woman in this text is saying, that this is their struggle and their identity and their journey to identifying womanhood on their own terms, which is the story of Black women since they brought us over here. Okay, let me not turn up. It's not. They taping. Listen, it's excellent. That's what I have to say. It's excellent. If it wasn't, I would tell you. If you weren't my friend, we would have had an honest conversation. I would have said, sis, don't put that out. Because Evan's not going to read that. But to make it through Dr. Josephine Bradley, through Dr. Stephanie Evans, through Dr. Lanice Littleton, and deliver a transformative and transformational text that we need now more than ever. We need it now. Oh, that means I got 1 minute left. All right, y'all, check this out. This book is going to end up on a banned book list. So get your copy tonight before they ban it and you can't read it no more, because they're going to ban. This thing is so good. They only banning good books. They not banning bad books. They only banning books that are trying to get somebody some freedom. So I'm saying to all my queer Black lesbian sisters in the world, I love you, and you are in this text. And my friend has done her part to make sure that you were reflected in this text. If you do not identify as such, you need to read this book more than the sisters that this book is for. Because this book is giving us a context of the Black experience. Notice I didn't say Black and queer, Black and women, the Black experience. This text is inclusionary and giving us a dynamic perspective of the Black experience that we need through the lens of Black queer lesbian women of the South. I would love to see what Black queer lesbian women in the West got to say, because the way you do things regionally really introduces us to the cultural experience of the South. And so, as I told you when you gave me the copy, I'm wondering if the experience in the Black queer lesbian North is different than the Black queer lesbian West. And are there some similarities and some differences in that experience that are worth exploring in another text? I will say the first thing that I said to Jayme when I read this book is that I believe it's about 300 pages too short. I needed more meat on them stories. I've been eating the tea, y'all. I love to read. Listen, that's why the librarian, I'm freaking out. Yes, I'm a nosy historian. And so we need the addendum with the full interviews, because I really part of my critique was like, I just need more context for the individual stories, because they're really about resilience and survival and struggle, and aren't they a bunch of beautiful Black women? Thank you, sis. Thank you.
Oh, Lord, that's hard to follow. How y'all doing, Saints? So for me, this title affirmed radical acceptance and inclusion. For me, as a Southern queer lesbian Black girl growing up in Southeast Georgia, it was always my dream to come to Atlanta, to always be a part of Zambi Nobla and meet Mary Ann. But also that this title taught me that pro-Blackness must include intersectionality, or it's just white patriarchy and blackface. And when I thought about, my lesbianism, this title, especially in The World is Set Up for Straight Folks, on page 129, it reads, the idea of lesbianism and queerness is somehow connected to white womanhood and uncovers the heteropatriarchy in the Black community. This matches to cishet men. The myth uncovers that SBP attempts to police Southern Black queer lesbian and queer non-binary conforming folk from their cishet sisters. And so for me, not only when I talk about it affirms acceptance, because I had to accept myself and the different elements of where my intersectionality lies, that my Blackness is not a greater value than my queerness, but that they're connected. And so this title is almost like a sister title to Honey Pot, Southern Black Lesbian Voices by E. Patrick Johnson. But for me, this title, because of the author, Dr. Canty, it's by someone within the intersectionality that's centered in the community, but also the academic work as a researcher. Like you mentioned, Dr. Evans, this is a timeless reference. So as you mentioned, please go out and get it, because they're banning all the great books. And so just knowing that the battery in your back and the motivator is here to be a part of the panel, and also the people that supported you. For me, this is a love letter to the little version of me. So all versions of me that are present are thankful that you wrote this title, and also what is next.
Okay. All right. So
beep, beep. Okay. Second question is, first of all, y'all gonna make me cry. I'm trying not to, because I have these lashes on. So I'm gonna try not to cry, because these lashes was a struggle to put on. And if I cry, they're just coming off. For the second question, please talk about how this work can help with your thinking about your work. So how do you see it connecting to your work, whether it's research or community work, and or the central message or feeling you hope the readers take away from this book? And after this, I will read the section about my hope for the reader. So yes.
So I am in my last semester of coursework. And I have a very ambitious goal to write this dissertation and be out of Clark Atlanta as soon as I can. And so, like, as I'm in the middle of this last semester, I'm thinking a lot about, like, how does all this stuff I've learned all these years, how do I turn that into something that will potentially one day be a book? And in my dissertation, I'm writing a new revolutionary theory, and I'm using fantasy novels as my data set. And yes. And I'm thinking a lot about what it means to be free, because in these books, in one way or another, all of these characters are looking for more freedom. They're fighting for more freedom. We are all fighting for more freedom. And so, what actually is freedom? When we look at social and political revolutionary movements throughout history, how are we conceptualizing the things that we're fighting for? Especially when we're using the language of freedom. In Black movements, in women's movements, in queer movements, in decolonial movements, in anti-fascist movements, what do we actually want? And sometimes we're wanting to be full members of society with the rights and responsibilities that entails. Like, we're looking for, like, political inclusion. Sometimes we're focused on economic freedom so that we have access to the goods and services that we need to live. And we're looking for ways to participate in labor and economic systems without being exploited. We're also thinking about the ways that we want not to be discriminated against. We want to be seen as full citizens. We don't want to be seen as an aberration. We don't want to be seen as cognitively delayed or psychologically impaired. We want to be seen as full human people. And so when you boil all of this down, most movements for justice and freedom are about being seen as human in all of the ways that it means to be human, whether we are thinking in terms of our cultural institutions like churches, whether we're thinking about how are we fully included in schools. We're also thinking about being included in political processes or experiencing the love of our families. So we want to be seen as fully human beside all of the other humans that are in our communities. And depending on the kind of oppression that we're facing, whether that's gendered oppression or racial violence or oppression or sexual violence or oppression, we're all want to be seen in our full humanity. And what Dr. Canty has done in this book is to create a framework to think about an intersectional place of resistance against these multiple layers of oppression. And while her framework is more social cultural, because she spends a lot of time talking about church and about families, there is also a radical implications economically and politically in terms of organizing and thinking collectively about how we see each other and ourselves as human. And there are also radical implications for political and community organizing. When we think about why the Black Lives Matter slogan hit so hard, that is because for hundreds of years, I have so much more to say. So I'll finish up by saying that Black women and Black queer women have been excluded from Black spaces because of our intersectionality and our multiple identities. And so within the framework of Snapping Beans, we're able to create a place where all of those identities are welcome and affirmed, where we can then move in that space to work for collective freedom for Black communities, for women, and for queer folks.
Okay, so the takeaway message for me was about wellness. And here I would like to point out that this book is part of the Black Women's Wellness series at SUNY Press. And the reason why I started editing that series is because I wanted to acknowledge the challenges and the struggles that Black women have gone through, go through, will go through. But I also wanted to know about the solutions. And so my theorizing was around the concept of historical wellness, that how do we see Black women as more than tragic figures? What you've done here in this book is show Black queer women of the South are not tragic figures. We are not dealing with the tragic mulatto and, oh, this is, these are people we should pity, and, oh, this is like, no, because one of the things like that, was it LaShawn, LaDawn, right? LaDawn, right? Talked about all hands on deck, right? One of the main takeaways is that unlike some other communities, Black queer women are in families, right? Whether and families and churches, and whether that's, what's called fictive kin, right? Or the families that we make, or the families that we're born in. And so for me, the whole process of reconciliation with yourself, reconciliation with your southernness, right? And not trying to be something other than Southern, reconciliation with the church, and saying like, I like, everybody's fleeing academia, like, oh, it's terrible here. Guess what? I'm a Black woman. It's terrible everywhere. I'm not going nowhere. Right. And so the way that you reclaim the church and say, I don't have to give up my church. Right. I'm gonna do church with the people who see me as human. Right. To your point of dehumanization. Right. But your reconciliation is absolutely radical, because it has to do with understanding, right? Got to bring the boys in the house, right? That, how does it feel to be a problem? Black queer women in the South are not a problem. What do we do if we operate from the premise that the people who we're working with, who I identify with, are fully human? Like, what if we start there? And that's, so the wellness and the reconciliation are complete. And that's why I say this is a whole meal. And I'll end by saying, you made me see the phrase "bless your heart" very differently, because when people say, "Well, bless your heart," we know what that means, right? It's like, you special, right? But I always saw it as a Southern thing. But you're really talking about bless your heart, right? The churchy part, the spiritual part, the I connect with you part, the I see you part, the I love you part, the I'm reclaiming you part, and even that reclamation means that I'm going to correct you because you're shady right now, right? So bless your heart means so much more now to me. And I'll end by saying, on the digital part, the digital book on page 305, you do say, "This is my first book. It will not be my last." So like my colleague here, Dr. Littleton, suggests, we would like to see more, if not regional. I would love to see you do historical, right? You want to see how Black queer women are in different regions. I want to see historically right now, like where we are in the South. I would love for you to start archiving that story, right? The histories, because there's so much there, right?
Wow. Talk about tough acts to follow. On page 129 of the hardback text, Jayme Canty states, Jayme Canty Williams. I told y'all I'm the and William, right? Okay, we're a unit. It says, no woman wants to be labeled a lesbian, especially a cisgendered heterosexual Black woman. And that's why I had to push back on Jayme Canty. I understand what she's saying, but people assume all the time, because I spend most of my time with Black queer lesbians of the South, like my roommates, and then our extended fam. They in the building. I love the fam. That it's somehow negative to be in proximity with Black queer women of the South. It somehow diminishes your character or your person. And I want to say that I feel so empowered every time I'm around Black queer women of the South. Because it's not a victim party, it's not a woe is me party. It's some of the most lit parties I've ever been to. The food is so good. Shout out to Hillary, the food is so good. And the fellowship and the wellness. I always feel whole. I always feel well. I always feel taken care of among my sisters. And so what I want to do moving forward, when I think about my own work as a historian, my own work as a public historian, your work makes me ask so many questions. I wonder about Black queer lesbian women on the plantation. The plantation is such a gendered experience, right? It's rooted in really sexual performativity, right? The idea to be able to give birth to a baby, but you don't have to be a straight woman to give birth to a baby. And so I think about all the Black lesbian women on the plantation who gave birth to so many babies. But their identity and their experience has been silenced, even when we talk about the origin of our social system as a nation. I think about Black queer lesbian women in the Black Women's Club movement who had to choose their womanhood over their queer identity in the name of moving as a community. And so I want to know what's up with them. I think about Black queer women in the civil rights movement and how by the time we get to the civil rights movement, by the time we get to Black Power movement, it's like whispers of shit. But you can't stand proud in it, right? Because we're fighting for our community, and somehow you asserting yourself as a same-sex loving woman is going to diminish our community, right? So it makes me think about how illogical and nonsensical a lot of our approaches to freedom have been, and perhaps that's why we're not free yet, not gonna get free unless we'll say all the time, listen to Black women, right? Because Black women are the ones who know. I want to amend it and say, listen to Black queer women of the South, because they continue to do the work of liberation. Is that my end timer or my 1 minute timer? 1 minute. Listen, y'all. I want to see so much more from Dr. Jayme Canty Williams in terms of the work that she does in the public sphere. We need you in the public. We need a pop-up exhibition that tells these stories. We need photos that accompany these stories. We need the digital humanities. Yes, we need digital humanities because it's like 20 people in here. It's 20 people who gonna read a book on a Friday night at 7:30, right? But it's 2,000 people that will come to an exhibit. Sometimes we need a different medium to get the message across. And so of course, Jayme and I have worked together in the past. We was in Cascade doing the Cascade Oral History Project together. And so I think the future of my work is collaboration with my best good sister friend to create the space to bring it to the public, because I really think we need that. And I have some tools and some resources to help you do that. And then I think Dr. Evans will not be asking me about a book all the time. So the last thing I'm going to say, even though I know I'm out of time, is that's why I'm saying the last thing I'm going to say is, my dear friend, my dear mentor, y'all inspire me to write. You inspire me to write. I feel like if I'm going to be around y'all, I need to put some words on the page. So that's what's next for me. Some words on the page in the spirit of these giant intellectual women. Come on, Doc. You coming.
You are hilarious. You got to do some stand-up. You know what I'm saying? Put her on stage. No, but if you look towards your book around page 160 for me, I'm standing in my truth. For me, this title, it really talks about intentional affirmation of self and communal love. And for me, it affirmed that duality. I'm on the board of directors for Atlanta Pride and have been for the past 3 years. But as a licensed librarian, I'm in spaces alone where I'm either prioritizing the archival preservation of a collection, like when I was able to process the presidential collection of Zambi Nobla at the Auburn Avenue Research Library. It was solely me, but I felt like I was given almost a gift from the universe. Excuse me, my bad. Thank you, baby. A gift from the universe, because just having that access and behind the scenes, it was like, oh, wow, how empowering is it to see that they've been doing this work for years, but who else is interested in this? And why am am I the only person in this room that is touching these assets beforehand and after? And, secondly, when I'm occupying and lobbying and organizing in this space of Atlanta Pride, I'm the only woman of color and I'm the only Black woman and have been for a minute. And so yes, I'm the only Black woman on the board of directors for Atlanta Pride. There's Dwayne Queen, who also sits on the board, who's on Black Atlanta Pride. But in those spaces, they're primarily white and cisgendered. So seeing that there are other women at different generations, that intergenerational just expression, and just knowing that wherever you are, whether you come out later in life or you're still closeted, or if you identify gender fluid or non-binary, it affirms for me that duality. And so seeing that, it makes me feel less alone, seeing these narratives here, especially as you put so many different places of where people have come from if they're transit, because Atlanta is a second home, the South is a second home, Atlanta is Black Mecca for queer identities. And so just seeing, because I'm from Southeast Georgia, so coming up to Atlanta is freedom. I passed the Mason-Dixon line of straight folks for me. So I'm here. Yeah. If you go north of Macon, you free a little bit, but just don't go where I'm from. I'm from the 912 area, St. Simon's Island and Blackshare. And even right now, it's not safe for queer people to be open in public because of some of our liberations being weaponized. But seeing how joy is an act of resistance, and as we mentioned, community love, because communal love, does not include the element of competition. And that's something that this book affirmed for me, that kinship, sisterhood, and as I mentioned, radical acceptance of self is about that lack of competition. So your only competition is the older versions of yourself that you have yet to detach from, that don't need to come today. So, I try. Shout out to my mom. She's a therapist.
Okay. Thank y'all so much. I am full. And when I wrote this book, I guess I did it as two things. One, it was that existential crisis, like I mentioned. And two, it was I wanted to see myself in the scholarship. I wanted to see myself, my narrative, my stories. But I didn't want it. I was like, it can't just be me, which is what the data set came in. Like, it can't just be me. And so I am thankful for the people who allowed me during COVID, when all of us was shut down, that gave me that time to have a conversation with them. And so many people gave me such vulnerable experiences in their lives, and took me to therapy for sure. I had to unpack some things, but it definitely it became a mission for me. It wasn't just about, oh yeah, I need to get this book to have tenure or anything. It was that too, right? But it was also, I need this story, because as a upcoming scholar, I didn't have it. So I wanted this to be a gift to the future versions of me coming through. So I'm so thankful that y'all are here and that y'all received it, and that y'all received it in the way that y'all did. I'm just blown away, truly. And I'm so glad that y'all saw yourselves in this text, because that was actually my hope for the reader, which I will actually read now. All right, segue. Come on, segue. Yay. Thank you, Monica. You're the best. All right. So if you turn to your hymnals on page 39, and this actually came last, because one of my editors, said, Jayme, you just dropped the mic. And I was like, what do you mean? She was like, you just ended the chapter. You left nothing else for the reader. I was like, I guess so. Right. So she said, if you were to give yourself some time in the book to speak to your reader. And I said, oh, so this was actually the last section that I wrote in the book. So I usually like to start with that. So my hope for the readers, I hope that you, the reader, see this book as I can hold it, I'm good. See this book as a testimony of love, self-love, communal love, and love for the South.
But with any kind of love, there is beauty, pain, vulnerability, accountability, and vulnerability. With love comes truth, a truth that is often suppressed or silenced by others. I want our truths to free somebody from the shackles of shame, silent shame, and condemnation. I want the truths of this book to provide someone with a hug, a few words of affirmation. You don't have to come out to the world, but I hope this book helps you to find authentic ways to live in your truth so you can be free to organically love yourself, your community, and your Southern roots. I hope the readers who find themselves in a dark place know that they are not alone. Let this book be your support and guide, affirming you that you are not alone and that your journey is not in vain. I hope the reader receives a new narrative about the Black South, one that is filled with complexities, contradictions, joys, pain, and freedoms in a seemingly contentious region. I hope the reader realizes in this journey that the Black South does not solely belong to Southern Black heterosexual folk. I want the readers to know that the Black South is diverse with many colors and layers, that there is that there are many ways one can exist and thrive in the Black South. I want the readers to get a glimpse into the world we rarely see. This book provides visibility for Southern Black queer folks, maybe not all Black queer or LGBTQIA plus folk. You have to add the QIA. Okay. Just okay. That part, add that plus. Identified persons, but at least one segment of the community that is hidden among the letters of sexual identity. In this book is all for all the sons and daughters, and I guess if it goes to the language, I wanted to be intentional about that. And I really thought that my editor was going to say, well, you might want to say daughters, but they ran with it. Shout out to SUNY Press. Mothers and daughters. Shout out to SUNY Press and the Black Women's Wellness Series. Shout out to SUNY Press, who the editor said, right, they said that, and capitalizing Black. And I had white in there, lowercase, and they did not correct it. I said, Shane, amen, right? So all of these, and even I said grandma and M, and I meant that. I would put EM, comma, EM. And she would be like, well, just put the comma over here and it's fine. And I was like, okay. So anyway, regardless of your own personal identity markers, I hope you see yourself in this book so you know the significance of your story of the South. No matter how far we remove ourselves from the South, I hope this book reminds you that the South is woven into your being. Instead of carrying it with shame, let it be a marker of pride. For those who encounter this complex Black South daily, I hope you find a part of your story in this book. For my brothers and Southern sisters, and again, sisters, not sisters, sisters, both queer/lesbian and straight, I hope that this work helps you to realize all the ways we deal with same societal oppressions, even if they manifest differently for Southern Black queer lesbians. In our lives, we had to unlearn some toxic gender norms that kept us suppressed for generations. For my Southern brothers, and I have brothers, both queer, gay/straight, I hope that you gain some perspective of how these toxic gender norms we value in the South also affect you. I hope that these words help you to unlearn some generational norms related to masculinity. I hope it breaks your chains. While I'm using the words of Southern Black queer lesbians, I know that their words are also your words. This book is a glimpse into Southern humanity and nuances that bring Southerners together while also shedding light on the silent voices in the Southern landscape. I'll go to the last bit. Oh, well, this book is not intended to speak to the experiences of all Southern Black queer folks. This text is not intended to water down the Southern Black queer lesbian experience as a monolithic experience. However, this book shares some common threads that exist in many of our lives. A collective narrative is not the only narrative, nor is the end of uncovering the lives of Southern Black queer lesbians. Oh God, there goes our second book. I must have been feeling myself with this book. Yay, I'm going to write another book. This book is merely the beginning of sharing our many voices. This book is for all the Southern Black queer lesbian gender nonconforming persons who had to remain silent about who they were. This book is for those Southern Black queer ancestors who did not exist in their truth out of fear of being silenced by violence, shame, condemnation, and heteronormativity. So those plantation Black women, those Black club Black women, when you said that, it made me think about that. Jayme N, because she read the text. We used to say that in class. So I read the text. And yes, this book is dedicated to the women and people who could not speak or live their truths. I know Southern Black queer ancestors existed long before I even considered writing this book. Black queer folks have always lived in the South and found ways to thrive, but our stories are overlooked and silenced. With this book, folks get a glimpse into our world, and a lot of it I use us and we because I'm part of the community as well. I invite you all to sit down at the kitchen table, snap beans with us, and listen to our journey to wholeness. So that was my hope for the reader. Oh, we only have 5 minutes. I'm so sorry. Okay. I guess we will take questions at this point.
I'm gonna undo everybody's mic so that I'm not running back. Okay.
Hey friends, how y'all doing?
Friend.
I'm Zion. I'm Zion Z. McThomas. I'm a historian as well. I'm actually looking at PhD program. But shout out to you. What's your name again? I'm sorry. Lanice Littleton. Dr. Littleton, you mentioned referencing back to the Black queer women who were silenced, and it made me think of Evelyn Higginbotham's Radical Obedience. Yes. So shout out to you. I want to ask the question around like collecting the oral histories of all of these women. Did you because I went to Auburn and it was very male sapiens. And for my master's, but I went to Alcorn State for bachelor's. All right, but yes. So when you were taking these oral histories, they always told us like, don't just prepare questions, like go in there and just talk and have a conversation. Did you do it like the conversational way, or did you have prepared questions, or did you do both?
I had both. So of course, I had a set of questions, and it's so funny. So when I submitted my book proposal to SUNY Press, I was intended to do social, economic, and political experiences. However, once I spoke to maybe my third interlocutor, the church took up the whole conversation. And I didn't want to keep them all day, right? Because by the time we got to the church, it was like 3 hours in. So then my questions actually changed it didn't change, but I removed a lot of questions and made it shorter because some of the questions I didn't realize some of the questions I had were heavier questions and I realized are multiple part questions. So it started as okay, I have a script or I have a list of questions to kind of gauge, okay, this notion of Southernness. How do you remind snapping beans? What do you define yourself as Southern? Why not? Because there were some people in the book that didn't define themselves as Southern, right? And so negotiating those nuances and uncovering those complexities. But as we started in conversation, they might say something and I'm like, oh, can you explain that a little bit more? So it ended up being conversational. And I think because I too am part of the Black queer lesbian community in the South, there are some conversations that there were some things that were said that I said, girl, I get you. So it was almost in this book, I felt like I was trying to build that community with that person. In the beginning, we were strangers, and then we ended up being, is it me? Is it the in the beginning we might have been strangers, but by the end of the conversation we were family. And so some were actually people I knew. And so it's so funny them seeing me as an academic doing the read. They're like, oh, you talk a little different. This is a little we're not kikiing over a margarita. Like, what is it? So they saw a different part. But the people I think that I didn't know, I was able to be in conversation with them more. So yeah, it was definitely more of a conversation, a mutuality of learning where they learned from me as much as I learned from them. And it's so funny because building that community was something that was important, which is what led to kind of that reconciliation. So it was definitely a conversation.
And can I comment as well about the intentionality of that?
Yes.
Because I always say that your theory and your data and your method have to align. So what you did and you lay out in the book is the intentionality of snapping beans as a theory of communal epistemology. Like we are making meaning together, but you use that then as your method of data collection and you lay that out. So as a researcher, it's an innovative way to address, those types of questions about how do you engage your community in an ethical way, in a mindful way, and in a prepared way that is mutually making meaning rather than having your checklist and this is what the checklist say, so this is what I'm going to do. Right. So your theory and your method align.
Thank you. And I'm thanking you for bringing that up, Dr. Evans, because I think even the notion of snapping, when I originally started the project, I literally wanted to snap beans with people. However, COVID happened. And that limited that. But then, snapping beans became almost an ancestral memory of being with grandma and them. And how did that represent what we were doing in that moment in conversation with one another? How were we kind of replicating that moment of sitting down with grandma and them and snapping beans and sharing these very intimate, vulnerable stories with one another, and things we don't share, as was mentioned in the silence chapter, that the Southern Black queer girl sitting in grandma's kitchen might not say everything, but she's in that space where she learns about this power of community and the power of speaking our stories in community and with community. So I wanted to replicate that with the conversations I had. So many of it was, if you listen to some of the recordings, I might sound real Southern. Like, yeah, girl. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of very much what happens when you're sitting with grandma and them snapping beans.
Can I say something really fast? I also think that the methodology of oral history is Dr. Jayme Canty Williams' signature. And her thesis project was oral history. Her PhD project was oral history. This book, which is not the PhD project, which is a feat in itself, is based in oral history. And so I think that that's been a signature of Jayme's personality just naturally, and as a scholar, that she's very mindful about the inclusion of people's actual voices. Which is different than, say, the methodology that Dr. Evans and I would take, being deep in the archives, trying to recover these types of conversations through letters and conversations. Jayme is in the streets talking to people. What she's not saying is that I wasn't there, but I know for sure, I will bet money that Jayme talked to these people for an hour and a half before she even turned the recorder on. Correct. Because that's Jayme's style of creating that friendship and that rapport and that comfort that makes you feel comfortable being on the record. So in working with Jayme on the Cascade Oral History Project, we were spending, 6 hours at somebody's house to do an hour-long interview because we're sitting down trying to create that rapport and so it's not even a labor of love. It's just naturally who Jayme is. And so I want us to understand that as a researcher, there's always an element of oral history inclusion. She's the only person I know in the world who will do the IRB and not complain about it, which is true. It's a rigorous process to get the approval to even do oral histories, but Jayme puts that in her timeline. And so you're an extraordinary researcher, and I want us to think about oral history as a means of preservation of stories as well. So to me, this is a history text. To some of us, this is a humanities text. This is a women's studies text. This is an LGBTQIA, I put the A in A text, but this is a history text. And so I want us to also lean into it as a means of preserving the current moment that we're in right now.
And yes, I was on talking to folk for about a good hour before I even had, so you are correct.
Is this on? Oh, great, it is on. There are many ways that I start gathering conversation. One is I've invited my ancestors into this space. I am a tribal elder, and as such, I am queer confirming Black ancestral elder, sitting here with my divine ones, sitting in a room of divine beings. And what comes to mind for me is there's a South African term called Ubuntu. I know there's a software company that has cannibalized it. They can't beat it. I've lived there, I experienced it. What I'm feeling in this room is the shoulders of the first womb sister in Africa who could not verbalize her affinity, her joy, her wonderfulness in being with another woman. However, there is the two spirited one. There are the gatekeepers. Dr. Maladoma Some and his wife talk about this. And when that became known, there was this movement. And mind you, I did say I was an elder. I'm going into 7 suns, 2 moons shortly. And as such, to be able to sit here and see the seeds of my walk as an elder and those that are close in that space, I am so lifted. I came to community at 35, always loved, I was a dancer, so I loved watching women move as a child, a daughter, right? However, I was raised in a religiosity that if I spoke out or expressed it, I would have been ostracized. What I'm able to take heart in is that you jumped out there. All of you have jumped out in your way. My question is simply, what were the age ranges that you spoke to and those voices invited in? I have a presumption, but I'd like to hear that.
That's a really good question. And going to your point about like the ancestors coming into spaces, this book was actually, I'm not going to cry. This book was actually inspired because, well, one of the inspirations, other than, of course, Dr. Evans, I received an ancestral reading. And one of the things that they said, she said, somebody queer is coming to talk to you. I said, she was like, do you have any queer ancestors in your family? I said, no. I know. I was like, no, know of. Not that I know of, I should say. They were like, this person wants to talk to you. And this person wants you to be unafraid. And so I literally sat with that for weeks, along with the conversation I had with Dr. Evans. And that's what inspired me to write the text, because that's why in the beginning I said, these are for the Southern queer ancestors who could not speak, who could not be their authentic selves. So I don't know who that person was. And once I was done, maybe I hope that I made them happy. That was always my goal, is that I hope that, yes, I'm bringing in, I hope that my interlocutors were satisfied with the text, but also I wanted to make sure those ancestors knew that this was for them as well, you know. Thank you. Thank you. Let me cry. But in terms of the people that I interviewed, they were between the ages of 25 and like 50, 55. So I spoke to a lot of Gen X, millennial. I didn't speak too much Gen Z, which is where the next project will come to. I am interested because when I talk to students, undergrad students, about this work, they're interested, particularly as I talk about kind of the return to this term lesbian, because when I was talking to people, folks were like, well, I'm not queer, I'm lesbian. And at first I thought, y'all just don't know, it's okay. And they're like, no, I'm lesbian, I'm not queer, I'm same gender loving lesbian. If you want to say same gender loving, fine, but I'm one of the two. And when I have that conversation with undergrads, they are like, yeah, I get that. I think that they resonate with the naming and the return of naming in terms of lesbian versus queer, because I think that for them, and just conversations in class I've had, they say, you know, queer just got out of hand in a way. And so because of social media, and that there's so many, like, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to exist like this, you have to exist like that, in order to be inclusive in the community. So that is something I would like to look into a little bit more. But the people that I spoke to, many of them were maybe I don't think I spoke, and I didn't speak to any baby boomers. I did not. Yay, but I will reach out. Right. I did not speak to baby boomers, but that generation to me is the biggest inspiration, a big inspiration for me, because to be queer in the 70s, the 60s and 70s and 80s, when we're seeing it happening now, this kind of like world, this new world order that we're living in. And so to be queer and lesbian in that time, to be a Black lesbian at that time, I'm just like, God, that's an experience we have to celebrate. And I think that that's actually one of the things I am thinking about doing, is uncovering that, like, Black Southern, Black queer lesbian history in Atlanta specifically, because Atlanta, like Forrest said, is the Black Mecca, but it's a Black queer Mecca also. So I'd be interested to see the generations of people that have been here and see what that looks like, to see if there's that. So those are the people I talk to.
Am I on? Yes. That as you say, the baby boomer. I am a 50 baby. Do I consider myself a baby boomer? Absolutely not. I'm timeless, ageless, infinite, right? But that's the term. I get some benefits. I do get pull my senior, discount. So I think that's important because even before I was born, especially in the South, because it's living in the South is very new for me. Those voices were cosmopolitan in Harlem, Chicago, LA, and those places where you could be a dandy in a suit and be a woman, or whatever array you chose. In the South, I could want to explore, in addition to all the constraints and all the restraints and all the oppression, what was that experience? So thank you.
Yeah, that'd be the next project. Yes, absolutely.
I want to shout out what Marianne is saying, which is that her current oldest member is age 90 in Jayme N. We also on our altar have pictures on the far left of some of our Black lesbian elders who have gone on. So, there are lots of folks ready to tell their stories. Jayme N also has a community archivist project. So Marianne wants y'all to know, in case anybody, specifically you, Forrest.
Yes. Marianne, I will be emailing you.
Dr. Canty.
Don't make me cry.
That's the goal. I have to say this. I have yet to read the book because I am currently accepting that it's time to heal. The first book that I decided to read to start my healing was Black on Black by Dr. Black.
Yeah.
And so when you guys posted this back in December, I immediately grabbed a ticket, even though I hadn't read it, and I'm going to buy it tonight because I'm in that journey. But I want to say to you personally, thank you for this. Born and raised in Atlanta, and everything that you guys have been talking about, I'm real life experiencing right now. And you and Ebony were the first women that I've met that were married. And I remember I had a conversation with you on a bridge, and I said, I want to marry my girlfriend, but I am so scared. And our wedding is in 20 days. Yeah. So I say this to say that as a fellow alum of Park Atlanta, being in community with you, just in the distance that we've held, you have impacted my life. And this book, I know I said it's going to happen. This book is the key to what we need. I remember and this isn't a question, I should have said that. This is a comment. I had to tell you this because I think growing up, we're looking for ourselves in other people. Yeah. Always. Yeah. Even when I was sitting in Dr. Black's class, I'm looking for myself in him. And as much as I can see myself in him, he's still a man. Yeah. And so you have this text now. And you have this text that when I have the emotional capacity to sit down with and snap beans with, I'm going to read it. And I'm going to tell you how much it has transformed my life. But I wanted to tell you before even reading it, the impact that you've done on my life. So thank you so much. Of course, Dr. Littleton, thank you for connecting us. And thank you for this book. And I'm sure it'll impact future generations to come. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, yes, that conversation. And I said, girl, if you don't marry her, stop playing. I said, it's expensive, so save your coins. I remember saying that specifically. But open it when you're ready. Because writing it was a journey. I've cried through writing it. My wife can attest many nights up writing, and she's like, "Are you going to bed?" And I'm like, "I just got to get this thought out." And shout out to my wife for always keeping me grounded. For always, she, when she read part of it, she's like, "Am I part of a muse?" I said, "Of course you are." So yes, thank you for that. But yeah, it was. So I will say that's why I wanted to do it. So that's why I'm like trying to hold back tears. But I definitely, you're the reason why I did this. And I want to say I can't wait for the work that you do. I can't wait for the wedding. I can't wait for the pictures. But open it whenever you're ready. There's no rush at all. Whenever you're ready. Yeah.
So I also did not read the book, and I just moved here. So thank you.
Welcome to Atlanta.
And I am not from the South. I'm from the North. And one thing that I find a lot in like Black queer communities is this like, it seems like this pressure to really like try to hold on to the church. And I personally like, there are those of us, and including me, that feels like religiosity is just suffocating. Like it's just not for you. So it's just like, I guess my question is, and then sometimes you feel ostracized by the rest of like the Black queer community because it's like, you don't believe in this, right? Or you don't believe in something, or you don't believe in this particular dogma. So then it's like ostracization upon ostracization upon ostracization, right? And then like, so I guess when does that end? And where's the space for that?
When does that end, child? It's a lot of unpacking, and I think that's what I talk about in the book, particularly as it relates to the church. And it's not just the institution as much as it is the families that's connected. So it's grandma and them. A lot of them talk about mothers. Mother became a big part. Again, I had to go therapy, y'all. Mothers became a big part of that conversation. So when you're in the South and you're surrounded by Southern Black queer folk who don't understand, is that we have been so intimately connected to the church in a way that it's hard to, we have to figure out, what does this mean for me and my queerness? And so there's a freedom that you have that I think a lot of people wish they had, in terms of, we don't have to unlearn, there's not this we're probably looking at you like, you don't got to unlearn nothing. You ain't got to struggle with your mama and them. And, like, let me be clear.
I was raised in the heart of the Church of God in Christ. So
Oh God,
there's a lot of unlearning.
There's a lot of unlearning. Woo. Jesus. First of all, I'm so sorry. Okay. Jesus. Oh my God. So yes. Okay. Well, unlearning. All right. But there's a journey to unlearning that some people still want to attach to something to make sense of the life that they live. Because like I put in the book, just because one is queer doesn't mean their lack of spirituality or their lack of wanting to be connected to a spiritual space, place, location, building. So I think for some people there's that desire still, right? What does that look like? We don't know. And I guess that's part of the journey. Some people reconcile by being like, F this, I'm not doing this, I'm doing my own thing. Some people atheists, some people decide to go more of the African spiritual realm. Some people try to do so many different things as a way of like making sense and reconciling with that queerness. Some people do both. Right? Some people are like, I'm in the church, but I'm also in this EFI space, or whatever the case might be, because that's what makes more sense to me. So I think it's just the journey of figuring out in that reconciliation. I think that's part of the wholeness process, is how do I find wholeness in unlearning and finding my own path. But for Southern folk, it's so intimate for our families. And I think that's the biggest part, is that we have to find something. What that thing is, we don't know, but we have to find something, because grandma and them, daddy's a deacon, auntie's a missionary society, you go to family reunions and they're gonna pray at the church house and stuff. It's like, it's so connected to Southern life. And so it's an undoing of how do I exist in those spaces, and still be affirmed and not necessarily be separated. Because there's part of the Southern Black church that we love. And I talk about that in the book. You have public speaking. I tell my wife all the time, they need to bring that back, okay? Because these kids can't talk. They can't do public speaking. But I remember going in front of my church in Sumter, South Carolina, having to come on, Sumter, South Carolina. And then all these folk, you're doing a poem, and the older you get, the longer the poem, the longer the verse, But that was one way of learning how to public speak. And then, of course, the family component. There are multiple families that exist within the church. That's part of your family lineage, because in the South, of course, historically, that's our social space. You know what I mean? That was where we didn't just worship, we would commune with one another. That's how a lot of our families are grown. Family reunion I would have with my dad's side of, one of the sides of my dad's side of family. It convenes at the church. Like, it's just, that's part of the family church. So I think it's so indoctrinated in our Southernness that it's like, you have to find something or some way to reconcile with those things. So I think that's part of the journey. So whatever that looks like, it might just look differently, but do you, and God bless you. Especially from in that church. My goodness. Now I will say, speaking to Kojic folk is similar to that for me, because wow, it is so intense. The fundamentalist is so intense. That is a lot of unpacking with that. And I remember with those interviews having to, I need a few days before I talk to anybody else, because this is a lot to unpack with those fundamentalist Christian denominations. So your journey is still valuable in that way. Absolutely.
All right, y'all. I want to give time for signing and one-on-one and appreciations and all of that. So I'm going to say thank you to our online people and remind you that you can click the teal button at the bottom center of the screen to buy Snapping Beans from Karis. It really does help us when you buy event books from us. So please consider clicking that teal button. Tell a friend, request it at your local public library. Maybe buy a copy and donate it to your alma mater. Get it in their library. We have so many friends and family in the chat. I just want you to know the chat's been very lively and appreciative, including mom and dad.
Of course, James and Marilyn are in the building.
Lots of sweet family here. So thank y'all for being so lively and lovely in the chat. We're going to go ahead and say goodnight to you. But